Ever been told your private dock has healing vibrations by someone who wears crystals like military medals? Yeah, that happened to me on day 2. He said my dock was now a healing zone for the community and let her cousin dry his underwear on it. What she didn't know. I own every inch of that lakefront, and I turned her spiritual retreat into a toll road. What would you do if someone tried to claim your property in the name of community vibes? Drop your wildest HOA horror stories in the comments, because I need to know I'm not alone in this madness. The Pine Lake house came to me fair and square. The property was mine, left to me by my grandfather, God rest his lawn-mowing soul. The deed was older than the HOA bylaws and more binding. But that didn't stop Clarabelle May, the reigning clipboard queen of Pine Bluff Shores, from storming my porch at 8 a.m. sharp in yoga gear that cost more than my truck. She looked like a walking essential oil commercial and spoke with the authority of a woman who thought Alexa reported directly to her. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "We believe in shared spaces, positive vibes, and community healing zones." Now call me crazy, but I thought my grandfather's dock was for fishing, not aura exfoliation. Clarabelle pointed to the water like she'd just discovered the Pacific. "This is a sacred shoreline," she declared, "and we all need to respect the energy it provides." Behind her, a tent flapped lazily in the breeze. Zeke's tent. Inside, 2 coolers, a folding chair, and a clothesline full of boxer briefs that screamed recent divorce. He popped out like a jack-in-the-box and gave me a thumbs up. "Hey man, thanks for letting me crash here. Sunrise hits just right." See, Clarabelle had a talent for emotional manipulation so potent it could probably fry a lie detector. She made it sound like denying Zeke beach access was the moral equivalent of kicking a therapy dog. "Your grandfather was always so supportive of community needs," she sighed, "like the ghost of Christmas guilt. But my grandpa also used to say, 'Son, never trust a woman with a clipboard and a laminated mission statement.'" So I smiled, walked inside, and pulled out the manila envelope marked house stuff. That night, I found the original deed from 1953, and it sang like a gospel choir. Every inch of shoreline from water to weeds was mine. No shared spaces, no healing vortex, just cold, hard ownership. And suddenly I wasn't just a goo. Don't confuse peace and quiet with permission, especially when the man you're testing owns both the land and a receipt printer. Why is Clarabelle calling a neighborhood meeting? Comment clipboard if you think the healing vibes just hit a lawsuit. Clarabelle once fined a neighbor for planting aggressive lavender, so I knew I was next. The woman treated noncompliance like a felony, and my refusal to chant in her spirit circle basically made me a domestic terrorist in her eyes. I asked for documentation. You'd think I'd asked her to recite the Constitution backwards. "Sweetie," she said like I'd just spilled wine on her carpet, "we don't need paper when we have generational harmony." Then she invoked my dead grandfather like a seance medium trying to win an Oscar. "Your grandfather always valued our vibe circles. He'd never want you disrupting the flow." "Ma'am, the only circle my grandfather valued was the one on his lawn." Meanwhile, Zeke had gone full barefoot messiah. He set up a healing drum circle right in the middle of my dock, complete with bongos, beaded necklaces, and an incense stick that smelled like burnt regret. "Thanks for being so generous, man," he said between beats, like I'd Venmo'd him dock access. The audacity was so thick you could spread it on toast. He even brought a stack of homemade dream catchers he was selling for emotional tips. My dock had become Etsy Live, sponsored by Delusion. That night, I did what any disrespected grandson with a working printer and caffeine addiction would do. I found the deed. Buried deep in a crusty folder labeled House Stuff was the original 1953 document. It was older than Clarabelle's Botox, but 10 times more binding. Every inch of lakefront, from the grass line to the water's edge, was legally mine. No shared spaces, no communal chakras, distinct signatures, and the sweet sound of generational ownership. The next morning, I walked down to the dock like Moses with a scroll. "Clarabelle," I said, "I'd like to clear something up." She didn't even flinch. "Oh, sweetie," she purred, scanning the deed like it was an expired coupon. Paper fades, spirit is forever. Ma'am, the spirit better learn to pay rent. Her smile stayed frozen, but her left eye twitched like it knew a court date was coming. Never argue law with someone who believes bylaws are optional during Mercury retrograde. They called me petty for hiring a surveyor. I call it reverse colonization, with receipts. Because if Zeke was going to treat my lakefront like Burning Man meets Bass Pro Shops, I was going to treat it like a courtroom with Wi-Fi. Enter Gus, retired Navy, voice like gravel and a jawline that had survived 3 hurricanes and 1 HOA presidency of his own. The man showed up with more measuring tools than a NASA engineer and a stare that said, "I don't do vibes, I do boundaries." After 3 hours of dragging tape across dirt, launching sonar pings, and muttering GPS coordinates like he was mapping a military strike, Gus handed me a printout and said, "You've been invaded by floaters." Turns out my property line didn't stop at the beach. It extended 30 feet into the lake, which meant Zeke's grill, his hammock, his dreamcatcher stand, and that crusty boat tied to my willow tree? Trespassing. Maritime style. When I shared this revelation with Clarabelle, she laughed, the way cult leaders do when you bring up tax law. "Nobody owns water, sweetie," she sang, flipping her clipboard like it was holy scripture. "It's like air, or Enya." "Ma'am, tell that to the state of Colorado and anyone who's ever paid a water bill." She tried to pivot faster than a failed yoga pose, suddenly concerned that this whole property rights obsession might fracture our unity grid. Zeke, meanwhile, had started painting his boat with chakra symbols, like divine energy could override legal jurisdiction. I gave them both a tour of the truth, stakes in the sand, laminated copies of the survey report, and a 12-point diagram labeled Jack's Liquid Territory. Gus even offered to testify if this circus ever made it to court. Zeke had the nerve to ask if he could just rent the water instead. "You know I'm good for it," he said while pouring tap water into mason jars labeled Lake Essence, $12.00. The man was trespassing and drop-shipping moonlight. That night, I went to Home Depot with the rage of 1,000 unpaid invoices and bought 40 feet of marine-grade steel poles, 8 anchor drills, and 1 very satisfying no trespassing sign shaped like a fish. Because if they were going to treat my property like a retreat center, I was going to build something they couldn't ignore. Call it a line in the sand. Except this one went through water and came with hardware. You can't share what isn't yours, especially if it floats and smells like charcoal and entitlement. Zeke thought it was just a new dock, until the 3rd pole went in and Clarabelle dropped her kombucha. Wait till you see what I built that had the HOA in a full meltdown. Clarabelle once said, "This community flows like water." So I built a fence to stop the flood and charged $50.00 per spiritual wave. If community means people using your lake like it's a spa retreat for unemployed drum circle enthusiasts, then yeah, I went full damn engineer. Metal posts, 40 feet long, sunk into the lake bed like I was fencing Atlantis. The gate was the cherry on top, steel reinforced, padlocked, and framed by a polite little sign that read, "Private Access, $50.00, exact change, sunrise to sunset." I even added a drop box with a smiley face sticker and a message that said, "Namaste off my property." First morning, Zeke showed up wearing flip-flops and confusion, holding a fishing pole in one hand and a mason jar of lake water labeled Clarity in the other. He looked at the toll gate like it had personally insulted his aura. Clarabelle followed 5 minutes later holding what I assumed was her HOA Bible and rattled the gate like she was auditioning for a zombie movie. "This is spiritual extortion," she shouted, eyes wild, voice cracking like a gluten-free cracker. Zeke, ever the victim, mumbled, "You can't charge nature." I handed them both the laminated survey and reminded them that legally I owned every inch of this cove, including the part Zeke liked to vibe fish. Clarabelle squinted at the paperwork like it was an ancient curse scroll. "Paper means nothing when the soul is sovereign." "Ma'am, my soul just invoiced you for trespassing." By noon, the neighborhood caught wind of the Great Fence incident. Phones came out. People gathered. One guy brought popcorn. Zeke stood there counting crumpled $1.00 bills like it was a fish market, and he'd just overcharged a grandma. $50? He gasped. That's like highway robbery, but with lake breeze. He was $7 short and tried to Venmo me. I told him, this toll booth doesn't do apps, just attitude and exact change. He sat on a cooler and tried to barter with a hemp bracelet. Not today, Zeke. Not on my shoreline. Meanwhile, Clarabelle launched a protest by reading poetry through the bars like it was a Shakespearean prison. This fence is a symbol of fear, she declared. I nodded and added a no loitering sign next to her face. The gate became a full-blown tourist stop by day 2. Locals brought cameras, someone made a TikTok called Lake Tax, and through it all Zeke paid the fee, every single day. People scream greed the loudest when they can't take something for free and call it kind. Zeke just showed up with a 5-gallon jug of quarters and Clarabelle's holding a sage stick like it's legal tender. Wait till you see how they try to outsmart the fence, and what I install next that sets off every alarm. Clarabelle launched a protest called Free the Water. It drew 5 yoga mats, one guy with a kazoo, and a bored schnauzer wearing a tie-dye bandana. She stood in front of my toll gate like she was defending sacred ground, chanting things like, "Love flows freely," and "This dock is a chakra." It was less civil rights and more spiritual open mic night, if open mics came with essential oils and emotional black. The toll fence had become the neighborhood's new religion. Some called it capitalism with sunscreen, others called it, finally, peace and quiet. Mrs. Bentley from 2 houses down brought me cookies and a crisp $50.00 every Friday like it was communion. Meanwhile, Clarabelle passed out pamphlets accusing me of monetizing hydration. Zeke kept paying twice a day, sulking like a soggy pirate who'd lost his treasure map. His boat was still on my side, and every time he opened his wallet it looked like he was physically choking on capitalism. Things took a strange romantic turn when a teenager named Logan started using the toll gate as a shortcut to his girlfriend's dock. "It's worth it, man," he told me, handing over exact change like it was a love tax. $50 saves me an hour of walking and like 10 mosquito bites. His girlfriend's dad tipped me $5 the next week. Apparently my gate had become part of their family planning strategy. "At least I know where he is," he said, sipping beer by his lawn. Clarabelle wasn't amused. She staged a candlelight vigil with signs that read, "Water over wallets" and "No justice, no jet skis." Her kazoo friend returned, playing something that may have been a protest anthem or a duck mating call. Either way, they surrounded the toll fence at dusk like it was the Berlin Wall of mindfulness. She screamed, "This gate must fall! The lake cries for liberation!" I waved from my deck and played Kenny G on the outdoor speakers. If we're going to have drama, it might as well come with smooth jazz. I knew something was coming when Zeke slipped on a poncho and said, "See you tomorrow, unless the universe speaks first." That's when I finished installing my latest upgrade, a high-def motion-activated camera with night vision, cloud storage, and enough zoom to catch Clarabelle blinking in Morse code. Public opinion was starting to fray, and if sabotage was on the menu, I wanted every bite caught on film. Public opinion doesn't outweigh private property, especially if you laminated the deed and mounted it like a museum plaque. Zeke just accidentally bumped the fence with a kayak full of candles, and Clarabelle's carrying a clipboard labeled Plan B. Wait till you see what my gate cam caught after sunset. The receipts are coming. And they're high definition. Zeke tried to cut through my fence at 2 a.m., wearing Crocs, not even stealth mode, just full-on dad fashion and felony. What he didn't know is that my gate cam had night vision, facial recognition, and a trigger-happy cloud upload system that sent real-time alerts to my phone like, "Hey Jack, your fence is under attack by a man in foam footwear." By 2:07 a.m. I had 3 angles of Zeke grunting like a raccoon in a trash can, trying to chew through steel with dollar store bolt cutters. He gave up halfway, threw a tantrum that included kicking the fence, it didn't care, and muttering something about lake oppression. The next morning I added a new clip to my Barrett's Crossing security theater loop that played on a monitor by the mailbox. Neighbors watched like it was HBO. Zeke's sabotage premiered right after Clarabelle's protest kazoo solo. 5 stars. But the plot thickened. Clarabelle decided to go full HOA Hunger Games. She organized what she called a community reclamation march, and what the sheriff later called an extremely well-lit crime. 15 residents showed up with tiki torches, protest signs, and one guy holding a spiritual gong. Clarabelle raised her arms and shouted, "Take back the water! The lake belongs to the light!" But the camera got it all. Faces, voices, and that one lady in yoga pants stealing my solar light on the way out. When I turned the footage over to the sheriff's office, the deputy nearly dropped his coffee. "Sir," he chuckled, rewinding Zeke's croc ambush, "I've been in law enforcement for 18 years. Never seen someone record their own crimes this clearly. This is like watching a reality show about dumb trespassing." Zeke was arrested within the hour, still confused about why cutting a fence I don't own wasn't a valid stress relief technique. Clarabelle, meanwhile, got a formal warning for conspiracy to trespass, something she took as a compliment. "That's ridiculous," she hissed. "I am not a criminal. I am a steward of spirit flow." "Ma'am, no. You're a ringleader with a god complex and a subscription to Home Depot." The fallout was instant. Half the neighborhood stopped returning Clarabelle's calls. The other half tuned into my mailbox monitor like it was daytime drama. HOA Vice President Darla, who up until now had stayed neutral, walked up with a manila folder and a smirk that said, "Ooh, girl." "You gonna want to see this," she whispered. "Clarabelle's HOA email account? It's spicy. Apparently someone forgot to log out before rage-quitting the last board meeting. And Darla? She screenshotted everything. If you're gonna break the law, maybe don't live stream it on the neighbor's ring cam, especially if he owns 6 angles and edits like Spielberg. Why is Clarabelle's inbox titled Operation Lake Karma? And why is Darla printing it in color? Comment inbox if you think someone's about to drown in their own digital receipts. They called it the Pine Bluff Purge. I called it Tuesday. The emergency HOA meeting was packed tighter than a church basement during bingo night, only instead of cards, people were holding printouts of Clarabelle's emails like they were indictments from Judge Judy's secret court. There she sat, clutching her purse like it was life support, surrounded by people who had once bowed to her bylaws like commandments on a stone tablet. The motion to remove her was read by HOA Vice President Darla, whose voice had the cadence of a courtroom bailiff and the joy of someone getting revenge while still holding a muffin. Due to breach of trust, conspiracy to trespass, and spiritual delusions involving property theft, we hereby revoke Clarabelle Dewhurst's HOA privileges, effective immediately and permanently. The permanently part hit like a gavel wrapped in fireworks. Clarabelle muttered, "This is a witch hunt for the soul of Pine Bluff." "Ma'am, the only thing haunted is your email trail." Meanwhile, Zeke pleaded guilty faster than a kid caught elbow deep in the cookie jar. $8,000, 0 cents in damages, banned from the lake for 2 years. He didn't even contest the restraining order, probably because the courtroom played video of him throwing lake rocks at my fence like it owed him money. Clarabelle tried to speak on his behalf, but the judge silenced her with one raised eyebrow. Zeke left with a fine, a felony, and a lakeside reputation that made him the stuff of HOA bedtime stories. Behave, or you'll end up like Zeke. And the fence, it became Pine Bluff's hottest tourist attraction. People came just to pay the toll, take a selfie, and walk across like they were entering a theme park called Boundary Land. A guy from 3 neighborhoods over brought his lawn chair, paid $50, 0 cents, and called it the most satisfying petty act I've ever witnessed in person. Even kids loved it. Parents would hand them crisp bills and say, "This is what it looks like when paperwork beats privilege." Clarabelle, dethroned and defeated, sold her house within the month. Word was, she moved to a gated retirement community in Florida where the HOA required 2 forms of ID just to water your begonias. I imagine her there, trying to lead a wellness circle, only to be told, "Ma'am, that's a fire code violation." Funny how karma wears a sun hat and clip-on badge in Florida. There's a difference between enforcing rules and faking them so your nephew can take a dog nap on stolen lakefront. One leads to order, the other leads to eviction and crock-based crimes. The new HOA president just rang Jack's doorbell with a sealed envelope and a grin like she knew something big. They used to call me the HOA's nightmare. Now they call me, "Sir, do you validate fishing rods?" And yes, I do, provided your reel doesn't squeal and your bill's in full. What started as a revenge fence turned into Pine Bluff's quirkiest revenue stream. I dropped the toll to $25.00 for locals, introduced monthly passes, and printed a dozen laminated FAQs because people love rules, as long as they're my rules. Business boomed like July 4th in a Walmart parking lot. A couple proposed at the toll gate. Right there, down on one knee between the sign that said "No IOUs" and the box that said "Exact change, please." I even caught it on my Ring camera and offered to officiate their wedding. Toll waived for the honeymoon crossing. One morning, a whole family of ducks waddled under the fence gap. No toll, no paperwork. Just vibes. Clarabelle would have called it a biohazard. I called it Tuesday. Barrett's Crossing became a local legend. I sold shirts that said I paid the toll and mugs that read "Legal fence, local drama." Tourists came from 2 towns over just to experience what I called reverse HOA therapy, paying a man not to yell at them about mailbox width. My fence had gone viral. One guy offered me $10,000, 0 cents, to franchise it across his condo complex. I said I'd consider it, if he could explain the bylaws without crying. Then, one quiet Sunday, Zeke showed up. Not to cut the fence, not to curse the toll, but to apologize. He stood awkwardly at the property line, like a raccoon that had learned manners. "Man," he said, eyes low, "I was wrong. About all of it." He looked like a deflated beach ball in flip-flops. I offered him a soda and a seat, no toll required, because forgiveness, unlike community healing spaces, doesn't need a clipboard. The new HOA president, Miss Evelyn Hanks, retired fire marshal with a sense of humor and a laminated copy of the state constitution, brought me a gift, a bronze plaque reading "Barrett's Crossing, where boundaries built bridges." She said it with a wink and handed me an envelope that definitely wasn't cookies. Inside? A certified document from the county recognizing the toll zone as a recreational access corridor, eligible for community improvement grant. Clarabelle must have screamed into a potholder when she heard, "Don't weaponize community, build one. Fence optional, humor mandatory. Documentation always laminated." She tried to fine me for negative lake energy. I gave her receipts, barbed wire, and a business license. If you've ever been fined for bird feeders, lawn gnomes, or breathing too loud, hit like, drop your HOA horror story in the comments, and subscribe for more community comebacks. Because next time, the HOA might not just lose their mind. They might lose the lake. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. Let's laugh at the madness together. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story.